The crystal champagne glass shattered on the floor, silencing the entire ballroom. Amelia stood frozen, humiliation burning her cheeks, as her husband of a decade laughed in her face and introduced his mistress to the crowd. Mason Sterling thought this was his moment of triumph, but he failed to notice the man standing in the dark corner of the room, a billionaire who didn't see a discarded wife, but a queen waiting to be crowned. The crystal chandeliers inside the grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel on Fifth Avenue didn't sparkle for Amelia Sterling that night. To her, they looked like jagged teeth waiting to drop. It was supposed to be a celebration. 10 years. A decade of standing quietly beside Mason Sterling as he transformed from a scrappy, aggressive day trader into the CEO of Sterling Vance Capital. She had been the one to iron his only suit for his first pitch meeting. She had been the one to sell her grandmother's jewelry, the vintage Cartier brooch she adored to cover their rent in the early days of his startup. Now, she stood near the buffet table, clutching a glass of lukewarm sparkling water, wearing a dress she had bought off the rack at Macy's 3 years ago. Mason had told her not to buy anything new. "We need to appear humble, Amelia. Investors hate waste," he'd said. Yet, as she looked across the room, she saw Mason. He was wearing a bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo that cost more than her father's car. And he wasn't looking humble. He was holding court, his hand resting possessively on the lower back of a woman who was definitely not humble. Tiffany Roche, 23 years old, the daughter of a senator, and currently wearing a sequined red gown that screamed new money. Amelia took a breath, her chest tight. "Don't make a scene," she told herself. "Just go congratulate him on the merger." She navigated through the crowd of Manhattan's sharks, hedge fund managers, tech moguls, and socialites who looked through her as if she were made of glass. When she finally reached Mason's circle, the laughter died down abruptly. "Mason," Amelia said, her voice shaking slightly. "Happy anniversary." Mason turned. He looked at her, not with love or even annoyance, but with the cold, dead eyes of a man looking at a bad investment. The silence in the circle was deafening. Tiffany smirked, taking a sip of her champagne. "Amelia," Mason said, his voice projecting loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "I was wondering when you'd show up. You're late, and frankly, you're underdressed." I wore the blue dress you liked," she stammered, conscious of the eyes boring into her. Mason laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "I liked that dress when we lived in Queens, Amelia. We aren't in Queens anymore. But you never really left, did you?" The insult landed like a slap. "Mason, please, not here." "Why not here?" Mason stepped closer, towering over her. The room had gone quiet. This was theater now, and Mason loved an audience. Why delay the inevitable? "Look at you, Amelia. You're a relic. A reminder of the time I was desperate. I'm building an empire, and you're still clipping coupons. I supported you," she whispered, tears pricking her eyes. "I gave you everything." "You gave me mediocrity," Mason roared, throwing his arms out. "And I am done with mediocrity. I'm done with you." He reached into his tuxedo jacket and pulled out a thick, folded envelope. He tossed it at her. It hit her chest and fell to the floor with a heavy thud. "Divorce papers," Mason announced to the room. "Consider this your anniversary gift. The condo in Jersey is yours. The dog is yours. But the Sterling name? The shares? The life? That stays with me. And it stays with Tiffany." He pulled Tiffany close, kissing her on the cheek. The crowd, sensing the power dynamic, erupted into nervous, sycophantic laughter. They were laughing with him. They were laughing at her. Amelia stood frozen, her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She looked down at the envelope on the polished floor. "Pick it up," Mason sneered. "And then get out. You're ruining the aesthetic." Amelia knelt. The humiliation was a physical weight, crushing her spine. She reached for the papers, her hand trembling. As she stood up, clutching the document that ended her life, she looked Mason in the eye. "You will regret this," she said, her voice barely audible. "The only thing I regret," Mason replied, turning his back to her, "is not doing it 5 years ago." "Security. Escort Mrs. Miller out. She's no longer a Sterling." As 2 burly guards in dark suits grabbed Amelia's arms, dragging her toward the exit like a criminal, the ballroom exploded into applause for Mason's toast to the future. But in the far corner of the room, Seated in a dark velvet booth that had been reserved for a VIP guest who rarely showed his face, a man watched. He hadn't laughed. He hadn't clapped. Gabriel Blackwood, the man who owned half the real estate Mason Sterling rented, set his whiskey glass down. His eyes, dark and dangerous, tracked Amelia until the doors slammed shut behind her. Regret? Gabriel murmured to himself. He has no idea what that word means yet. 3 months later, the New York winter was unforgiving, but it was nothing compared to the cold shoulder of the city's elite. Amelia Miller, she had dropped the name Sterling, immediately sat in a cramped coffee shop in the Lower East Side. Her hands were wrapped around a paper cup of tea to warm them. The condo in Jersey Mason had promised turned out to be heavily mortgaged. The lawyers, paid for by Mason's endless war chest, had buried her in paperwork. She had walked away with almost nothing just to make the fighting stop. She was living in a fourth-floor walk-up with a radiator that hissed and clanked but produced no heat. She had applied to 5 galleries that week. All rejected. Her portfolio, delicate, architectural charcoal sketches of forgotten New York buildings, was too melancholic for the current market, or so they said. The truth was, Mason had blacklisted her. One phone call from the office of Sterling Vance was enough to terrify any gallery owner in the city. Amelia checked her phone. A notification from Instagram popped up. It was a photo of Mason and Tiffany on a yacht in Street Tropez. Caption: Building the future with the only partner who matters. Sterling life. She swiped it away, biting her lip to keep from crying. Crying didn't pay the rent. She pulled out her sketchbook. She had been working on a drawing of the coffee shop's interior, the way the steam rose from the espresso machine, the tired lines on the barista's face. It was raw. It was real. The perspective on the counter is off, a deep voice said. Amelia jumped, knocking her tea. A hand shot out, catching the cup before it spilled over her drawing. She looked up. Standing there was a man in a long, charcoal wool coat. He was older than Mason, perhaps in his early 50s, with salt and pepper hair cut with military precision and a jawline that looked like it had been carved from granite. He wasn't classically handsome. He was intense. I'm sorry? Amelia stammered, wiping a droplet of tea from the table. The counter, the man said, pointing a leather-gloved finger at her sketch. You've drawn it from a standing perspective, but you're sitting. It makes the barista look like he's floating. Amelia frowned, looking back at her work. He is floating. Metaphorically, he's exhausted. He's disconnected from the ground. The man paused. He looked at the drawing again, then at her. His eyes were a startling shade of gray. Artistic license, he said. I respect that. Most people just make mistakes and call it art. You did it on purpose. He gestured to the empty chair opposite her. May I? Amelia hesitated. She was wary of men in expensive coats. But there was something about him, a stillness that felt safe. It's a free country. He sat down, not removing his coat. I'm Gabriel. Amelia. I know, he said. Amelia stiffened. You know? Did Mason send you? Is this another one of his games? Because I have nothing left to sign, and I have nothing left to steal. Gabriel's expression didn't change. I know who you are, Amelia, because I was at the pier 3 months ago. I saw what happened. Amelia felt the heat rise in her cheeks. The humiliation was a fresh wound, reopened daily. Then you saw a woman get thrown out like garbage. Did you come to laugh too? I don't laugh at potential, Gabriel said. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a business card. It was heavy, black cardstock with gold embossing. No company name, just a name and a number. Gabriel Blackwood. Amelia gasped. She knew the name. Everyone in architecture and design knew the name. The Blackwood Group owned the skyline. They were the silent giants behind the Hudson Yards redevelopment, the restoration of Grand Central, the new tech hub in Brooklyn. Gabriel Blackwood was a ghost, a billionaire recluse who famously refused interviews and fired architects for being 1 millimeter off on a blueprint. You're him, she whispered. I am, he said simply. And I have a problem, Amelia. I bought the old St. Jude's Cathedral in Harlem. I want to turn it into a library and art center for the community. But every architect I hire wants to tear it down and build glass boxes. They lack soul. He tapped her sketchbook. You see the barista floating because he's tired. You see the soul of the room. I need someone who can see the soul of that cathedral. Amelia stared at him. Mr. Blackwood, I'm not an architect. I'm a graphic designer and an amateur artist. And my ex-husband has made sure I can't get a job walking dogs in this city. Mason Sterling is a noise in the market. I am the market, Gabriel said, his voice dropping an octave. I don't care about your credentials. I care about your eye. I'm offering you a job. Lead concept designer for the Street Jude project. It pays 6 figures, starting today. Amelia's head spun. Why? You don't know me. I know you stood up after being thrown on the floor in front of 500 people, Gabriel said, his gaze piercing. And I know you didn't cry until you were outside. That is resilience. I can teach you architecture. I cannot teach you backbone. He stood up, placing the card on her sketchbook. Be at the address on the back of the card tomorrow at 8 a.m. Don't be late. And Amelia? She looked up, breathless. Wear whatever you want. I don't care about the dress. I care about the work. He turned and walked out of the coffee shop, disappearing into the snow. Amelia sat there for a long time, staring at the black card. Just then, her phone buzzed. A text from Mason. Heard you're trying to sell art at the flea market on 2nd Avenue. Pathetic. Stop embarrassing me with your last name. R. Amelia looked at the text. Then she looked at the card. Gabriel Blackwood. For the first time in 3 months, she didn't feel like crying. She felt a spark of something dangerous. She felt hope. She deleted Mason's text. I'm not embarrassing you yet, Mason, she whispered to the empty chair. Just you wait. The address on the back of the black card led to a building that didn't just touch the sky, it seemed to judge it. The Blackwood Tower was a monolith of dark glass and steel in Midtown, a structure so imposing that pedestrians instinctively walked faster as they passed it. Amelia stood on the sidewalk at 7:55 a.m. The biting wind whipped her hair across her face, stinging her cheeks. She was wearing her best interview outfit, a gray pencil skirt that had grown slightly loose since the stress of the divorce made her lose her appetite, and a white blouse she had spent 20 minutes steaming in her tiny bathroom. Over it, she wore her only winter coat, the wool bubbling at the cuffs from age. She looked at the revolving doors. Men and women in sharp, tailored suits flowed in like a river of money. They looked purposeful, important. They held briefcases that probably cost more than Amelia's entire life savings. You don't belong here, the voice in her head whispered. It sounded exactly like Mason. You're a housewife, Amelia. You're good for hosting dinners and walking the dog. Go home. She gripped the strap of her battered portfolio case until her knuckles turned white. No, she breathed into the cold air. I have nowhere else to go. She pushed through the doors. The lobby was silent, despite the movement of people. The acoustics were designed to absorb sound, creating a cathedral-like hush. The air smelled of white tea and cedar. Amelia approached the reception desk, a slab of unpolished black marble that looked like an altar. Name? The receptionist didn't look up. She was typing on a holographic keyboard, her headset blinking blue. Amelia Miller. I have a meeting with Mr. Blackwood. The typing stopped. The receptionist slowly lifted her head. She scanned Amelia from the scuffed boots to the frizzy hair. Her expression wasn't hostile, it was confused. As if a pigeon had wandered into an operating room. Mr. Blackwood does not take unsolicited meetings. Unless you're a courier, the mailroom is on B1. I'm not a courier, Amelia said, her voice trembling slightly. She hated that tremor. He told me to come. 8 a.m. The receptionist let out a soft, dismissive sigh. Ma'am, Gabriel Blackwood hasn't taken a scheduled meeting before 9 a.m. in 5 years. He is currently in a conference call with Tokyo. If you don't leave, I'll have to call security. Amelia felt the familiar heat of shame rising in her neck. It was happening again. The rejection. The assumption that she was nobody. Maybe he mocked me too, she thought. Maybe it was a joke. A billionaire's cruel prank on the woman drawing in a coffee shop. She turned away, blinking back tears. Of course. It was too good to be true. Miss Miller? The voice boomed across the lobby, slicing through the silence. Amelia froze. She turned back. Standing by the private elevator bank, flanked by 2 assistants who looked terrified, was Gabriel Blackwood. He wasn't wearing a suit jacket, just a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with muscle. He held a tablet in one hand and a cup of black coffee in the other. The receptionist scrambled to stand up. "Mr. Blackwood." "I was just," this woman claimed. "I know what she claimed," Gabriel said, his voice calm but carrying an edge that made the receptionist pale. He looked at Amelia. He didn't smile. His face was unreadable, intense. "You're 2 minutes late, Amelia." "I was at the desk at 7:55, Amelia said, finding a sudden surge of courage. "Your gatekeeper didn't believe me." Gabriel's eyes flickered to the receptionist. "If she is on my schedule, she is to be treated with the same deference you show the mayor. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir. Absolutely, sir." Gabriel nodded to Amelia. "Come. We're burning daylight." He turned and stepped into the elevator. Amelia hurried across the marble floor, the click-clack of her worn heels echoing loudly. She stepped into the car, and the doors slid shut, sealing them in a capsule of silence. "I didn't think you'd show," Gabriel said, watching the floor numbers climb rapidly. 10, 20, 30. "I need a job," Amelia said, staring straight ahead. "And I have nothing better to do than be humiliated, apparently." "If you want to work for me, get used to humiliation," Gabriel said dryly. "Architecture is the art of having your dreams crushed by gravity, budget, and zoning laws. If you can't handle a rude receptionist, you can't handle a city council hearing." The elevator opened on the 80th floor, the penthouse. It wasn't an office. It was a command center. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Manhattan that was so clear it was dizzying. Tables were covered in blueprints, 3D models, and samples of stone and glass. "This is the war room," Gabriel said, walking over to a large drafting table covered in a dusty white sheet. He pulled the sheet off, sending a cloud of dust motes dancing in the sunlight. Underneath was a large-scale model of an old, crumbling stone church. "St. Jude's. It's beautiful," Amelia whispered, stepping closer. Even in the model, the Gothic arches and the flying buttresses held a tragic sort of majesty. "It's a disaster," Gabriel corrected. "The roof is rot. The foundation is sinking 3 inches a year on the east side. The city wants to condemn it. My board wants to demolish it and build a 40-story luxury condo tower called the Saint. They think it's ironic. I think it's sacrilege." He looked at Amelia. "I have 2 weeks to present a restoration plan that is financially viable. If I can't prove that saving this building will make money, the bulldozers come in. I need a concept that turns a ruin into a destination." He pointed to a stool. "Sit." Amelia sat. "Draw," he commanded. "Don't think about the budget. Don't think about the engineering yet. Draw what it feels like." Amelia reached for a charcoal stick from the tray. Her hand hovered over the fresh paper. For a moment, she panicked. "I'm a fraud," Mason said. "I have no talent." He said my art was depressed doodling. "Stop listening to him," Gabriel said softly. Amelia looked up, startled. Gabriel was leaning against the window, watching her reflection in the glass. "I didn't say anything," she said. "You didn't have to. You have the look of a woman who is waiting for permission to exist." Gabriel turned to face her. Mason Sterling made his money by betting against people. He bet against companies failing, he bet against the housing market, and he bet against you. Are you going to let him win that bet? Amelia gripped the charcoal. Anger, hot and sudden, flared in her chest, not at Gabriel, but at the truth of his words. She looked at the model of the broken church. It was unwanted. It was considered dead weight. Just like her. She put the charcoal to the paper. She didn't draw lines at first. She drew shadows. She drew the way the light would hit the stained glass if the heavy timber doors were replaced with seamless glass arches. She drew a library where the choir loft used to be, floating in the air. She drew a community garden in the nave, bringing the outside in. She worked for hours. She forgot about the cold, forgot about her hunger, forgot about Tiffany's red dress. When she finally stopped, her fingers were smudge black. She exhaled, realizing she had been holding her breath. Gabriel walked over. He stared at the drawing for a long time. The silence stretched, agonizingly slow. "Well?" Amelia asked, her voice small. Gabriel traced a line on the paper with his finger. "You opened the crypt," he murmured. "You turned the underground crypt into a jazz lounge and reading room. It needs life," Amelia explained hurriedly. "The dead are gone. The neighborhood is alive. Harlem is music. If you bury the history, it's cold. If you play music in it, it's a heartbeat. Gabriel looked at her. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face. It changed his entire demeanor, making him look younger, less like a statue and more like a man. A heartbeat, he repeated. The board wants condos. You gave them a heartbeat. He walked to his desk and pressed a button on the intercom. Samuel, get HR up here and order lunch. Something with protein. Miss Miller is staying. He looked back at Amelia. You're hired. Junior designer. We'll reassess your title in 3 months. But understand this. Amelia, this is not charity. I expect you here at 7 a.m. every day. I expect you to learn CAD software. I expect you to know the building code better than the inspector. I will push you until you break, and then I will expect you to put yourself back together. Can you handle that? Amelia looked at her dirty hands. They looked like the hands of a worker, not a trophy wife. I'm already broken, Mr. Blackwood, she said, lifting her chin. I've got nothing left to lose. Push as hard as you want. Good, Gabriel said. And call me Gabriel. Mr. Blackwood is my father, and he was an asshole. 4 weeks later, the transformation wasn't a montage, it was a grind. Amelia's hands were constantly covered in graphite or paper cuts. Her eyes were rimmed with red from staring at blueprints until midnight. But there was a new steeliness in her posture. She had used her first paycheck to move out of the freezing walk-up and into a studio apartment in Brooklyn. It was small, but it had heat, and it was hers. She also bought 2 suits, not off the rack, but tailored. Gabriel had insisted. Clothes are armor, he'd said. Never go into battle naked. On a rainy Tuesday, Gabriel walked into the design studio, where Amelia was arguing with a structural engineer about the load-bearing capacity of the choir loft. Amelia, Gabriel interrupted. Drop it. We're leaving early. Amelia looked up, brushing a stray hair from her face. I can't. If we don't finalize the load specs by tomorrow, the city pulls the permit. The permit can wait. The politics can't, Gabriel said. He placed a garment bag on her desk. Put this on. The car's downstairs. What is this? She unzipped the bag. Inside was a dress of deep, midnight blue velvet. It was modest yet striking, with a high neck and a back that dipped low. It looked expensive, terrifyingly expensive. The Preservation Society Gala is tonight, Gabriel said, checking his watch. Every major developer in New York will be there. We need to secure the zoning vote from Councilman Holloway. He'll be there. Amelia froze. Every major developer? That means Mason will be there. Gabriel finished for her. Yes. I can't, Amelia said, stepping back. I'm not ready to see him. Not like this. He'll think I'm just my what? Gabriel's eyes narrowed. My mistress? My arm candy? Yes, she whispered. Gabriel stepped into her personal space. He smelled of rain and expensive cologne. Let him think what he wants. You know who you are. You are the lead designer on the most ambitious restoration project in the city. You are not there to hold my drink, Amelia. You are there to help me close a deal. I need my partner. Are you coming? Partner. The word hung in the air. Amelia took the dress. Give me 10 minutes. The gala was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The Temple of Dindur was illuminated with soft amber lights, casting long shadows against the ancient stone walls. The air buzzed with the hum of polite, wealthy conversation and the clinking of crystal. Amelia walked in beside Gabriel. She felt the eyes land on them immediately. Gabriel Blackwood never brought dates. He was the eternal bachelor, the monk of high finance. To see him with a woman, especially one who looked as striking as Amelia did in the velvet gown, was blood in the water for the gossip sharks. She kept her head high, her hand lightly resting on Gabriel's arm. She felt his bicep tense beneath his tuxedo. Breathe, he murmured to her. They're just people with money. Most of them are bored out of their minds. They circulated. Gabriel introduced her not as Amelia, but as my associate, Miss Miller. He deferred to her when people asked about the Street Jude project. He forced them to listen to her. And then she heard the laugh. That barking, performative laugh. The crowd parted near the buffet. Mason Sterling stood there, holding a scotch. Tiffany was draped over him like a shiny red shawl, looking bored and scrolling on her phone. Mason looked up. He choked on his drink. He stared at Amelia. He looked at the midnight blue dress that hugged her curves in a way the cheap Macy's dress never could. He looked at her hair, styled in a sleek, elegant twist. And then he looked at the man she was standing with, Gabriel Blackwood. The man Mason had been trying to get a meeting with for 3 years. Mason's face went through a complex gymnastics routine, shock, confusion, and finally, a sneer of defense. He handed his glass to a waiter and marched over. "Well, well," Mason said, his voice loud enough to draw attention. "I must say, I'm surprised. I didn't think the escort services accepted applications from women your age, Amelia." The circle of people around them went deadly silent. Tiffany looked up, giggling. "Oh my God, Mason, is that her, the sad ex-wife?" Amelia felt the blood drain from her face. Her hands started to shake. The old reflex to apologize, to shrink, kicked in. But before she could speak, Gabriel moved. He didn't step in front of her. He stepped beside her, aligning their shoulders. He looked at Mason with an expression of profound boredom. "Mr. Sterling," Gabriel said, his voice low and smooth like gravel. "I see you've brought your daughter. How charming." Tiffany gasped, her mouth dropping open. A ripple of suppressed laughter went through the crowd. Mason's face turned purple. "This is my fiancée, Blackwood. And I don't know what you think you're doing with my discarded trash, but I'd be careful. She's high maintenance and low return." Gabriel took a sip of his water, unbothered. "It's fascinating how you perceive value, Mason. It explains why your portfolio has underperformed the market by 4% this quarter." Mason stiffened. "My numbers are fine." "Are they?" Gabriel tilted his head. "I read the reports. You're over-leveraged on tech futures. But that's not why we're here. You seem to be under the impression that Miss Miller is here socially." Gabriel turned to the group of listening investors, raising his voice slightly. "Gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Amelia Miller. She is the concept architect for the Street Jude restoration. The designs everyone is whispering about, the ones that are going to revolutionize Harlem real estate, they came from her mind." He looked back at Mason. "She isn't my date, Mason. She's my secret weapon. And frankly, after seeing her work for the past month, I have to question your sanity for letting her go. It's the worst business decision I've ever seen." Mason looked at Amelia. Really looked at her. He saw the intelligence in her eyes that he had spent 10 years trying to extinguish. He saw that she wasn't looking at the floor anymore. She was looking at him. "You're lying," Mason spat. "She can't draw a straight line." Amelia took a step forward. She didn't shout. She spoke with the quiet calm of someone who controlled the room. "I don't draw straight lines, Mason," she said. "I draw structures that last. Unlike your marriage. Unlike your reputation." She turned to Gabriel. "I believe Councilman Holloway is by the bar. Shall we?" "We shall," Gabriel said, offering her his arm. They walked away, leaving Mason Sterling standing in the middle of the room, mouth agape, while the whispers of New York's elite started up again this time, laughing at him. Later, in the back of Gabriel's limousine, the silence was heavy. Amelia was trembling, the adrenaline crash hitting her hard. "You okay?" Gabriel asked, not looking at her, giving her privacy. I think so," she said. She looked at him. "Thank you for what you said back there." "I didn't lie," Gabriel said. "You are my weapon." He turned to look at her, his gray eyes shadowed by the passing streetlights. "My father was like him," Gabriel confessed, his voice quiet. "He treated my mother like an accessory. When she got sick, he replaced her before the funeral was even over. I spent my life building an empire just so I could look down on men like Mason Sterling." He reached out, hesitating for a moment, then covered her hand with his. His hand was warm, rough, and solid. "You held your own, Amelia. You didn't just survive tonight, you won." Amelia looked down at their hands. For 10 years, she had held the hand of a man who squeezed her until she disappeared. Gabriel's hand didn't squeeze. It anchored. "He's going to come for us," Amelia said softly. "Mason. He doesn't like losing. He's going to try to destroy the Street Jude project just to hurt me." Gabriel's eyes hardened. A dangerous smile played on his lips. "Let him try," Gabriel said. "He's playing checkers. We're playing chess. And he just lost his queen." As the car sped into the night, Amelia realized something. She wasn't just drawing buildings anymore. She was building a war machine. And for the first time in her life, She was ready to fight. Victory in New York City is short-lived. It has a half-life of exactly 12 hours. The morning after the gala, Amelia arrived at the St. Jude's site in Harlem with a lightness in her step she hadn't felt in years. She carried a roll of updated schematics under her arm and 2 coffees. The air was crisp, the neighborhood was waking up, and for the first time, she felt like she wasn't just occupying space, she was creating it. But when she turned the corner onto 135th Street, the lightness vanished. Silence hung over the construction site. The jackhammers were quiet. The crane was still. A group of 40 construction workers stood by the chain-link fence, smoking cigarettes and looking grim. Amelia's stomach dropped. She hurried to the foreman, a burly man named Samuel, who usually greeted her with a nod and a grumble about the weather. Today, he wouldn't meet her eyes. "Samuel, why isn't the crew inside? We're pouring the subfloor today." Samuel spat on the ground and pointed to the heavy oak doors of the church. "Ask the city, Miss Miller. They slapped that on at 6 a.m. Amelia walked to the doors. Pasted across the weathered wood was a bright orange sticker. Aggressive and undeniable. "Stop work order. Depth of buildings." "Why?" she whispered, tearing at the corner of the sticker. "Anonymous tip," a voice said behind her. Amelia turned. Gabriel had just arrived. He stepped out of his black sedan, phone pressed to his ear, his face a mask of controlled fury. He hung up and looked at the orange sticker. An anonymous tip claiming that the foundation work is disturbing a historically significant 19th century drainage system that doesn't appear on any map, Gabriel said, his voice dangerously low. "They've ordered a full archaeological survey. It halts construction for minimum 6 weeks. In 6 weeks, our financing window closes." "Mason," Amelia said. The name tasted like ash. "He did this." "Of course he did," Gabriel said. "He knows he can't beat me in the market, so he's using the bureaucracy. He's weaponizing the red tape." Amelia looked at the idle workers, then at the crumbling church. "He's doing this because of me, Gabriel. This is millions of dollars in delays. Because his ego was bruised." "It's not just his ego, Amelia. It's fear. He saw you last night. He saw you strong. Men like Mason build their castles on the idea that they are essential. If you succeed without him, his entire narrative collapses." Gabriel's phone buzzed again. He looked at the screen and his jaw tightened. "What is it?" Amelia asked. "Page 6, Gabriel said, pocketing the phone. "Don't look at it." "Gabriel," he sighed. The headline reads, "The Billionaire's Charity Case. How Mason Sterling's scorned ex-wife is playing house with Gabriel Blackwood's money." Amelia felt the world tilt. It wasn't just a legal attack, it was a character assassination. Mason knew exactly where to hit her, her insecurity, her fear that she was, deep down, just a fraud. "I need to go to the office," Amelia said, her voice hollow. "Amelia, listen to me." "I need to work, Gabriel," she snapped, her eyes filling with angry tears. "If I stop working, then the headline is true. If I stop working, I'm just the ex-wife." She turned and marched toward the subway, refusing the car. She needed to be among people, needed the noise of the city to drown out the voice in her head that sounded exactly like Mason. Back at the Blackwood Tower, the atmosphere had shifted. The deference she had earned over the last month had evaporated. As she walked to her desk, she felt the eyes, the whispers. Is she sleeping with him? Is that why she got the job? I heard she didn't even go to architecture school. Amelia sat at her desk, her hands trembling. She opened her email. Her inbox was flooded, not with spam, but with hate. Mason's social circle was vast, and they were loyal to money. Venomous messages from socialites she used to host for tea, fake concern from frenemies. "Honey, saw the article. So embarrassing. Maybe you should just move back to Queens?" She stared at the screen. She was drowning. Suddenly, a shadow fell over her desk. She looked up. It wasn't Gabriel. It was a courier. "Package for Miss Miller." She signed for it. A small, velvet jewelry box. Her heart hammered. Had Mason sent the ring back? She opened it. Inside wasn't jewelry. It was a single, rusted iron nail, and a note, handwritten on Sterling Vance stationery. "You're trying to build a cathedral, Amelia, but you forget I know where all the bodies are buried. Resign. Or I release the medical records from 2018. R. Amelia slammed the box shut, the air leaving her lungs. 2018. The year she had the miscarriage. The year she had a breakdown. The year she had spent 3 weeks in a private clinic for depression because the grief of losing the baby, combined with Mason's cold indifference. It happens, Amelia. Stop crying and move on. Had nearly broken her. He was going to tell the world she was mentally unstable. He was going to paint her as crazy to discredit the project. Amelia sat in the silence of the glass office, gripping the rusted nail. The cruelty wasn't just tactical anymore. It was evil. She stood up. She walked to Gabriel's office. The glass walls were frosted for privacy, but the door was open. Gabriel was shouting, "I don't care what the board says, Archibald. We are not dropping her." Amelia froze in the doorway. Gabriel was pacing, his tie undone, facing a screen where 3 elderly men in suits were visible via video conference. "She is a liability, Gabriel," one of the board members said. "The project is stalled. The press is toxic. Sterling is threatening a lawsuit regarding intellectual property. He claims she stole sketches from his home office. It's messy. Cut her loose, and the stop work order miraculously vanishes. We have assurances. You want me to fire the most talented conceptualist I've seen in a decade because Mason Sterling is throwing a tantrum?" Gabriel roared. "We want you to protect the stock price." The board member yelled back. "It's business, Gabriel. Just business." Gabriel slammed his hand on the desk. "Not to me." Amelia stepped back into the hallway, her heart breaking. She had become exactly what she feared, a weight around Gabriel's neck. He was fighting a war on 2 fronts, against Mason and against his own company. And it was all because of her. She looked at the velvet box in her hand. "It's business." She walked back to her desk, took a piece of paper, and wrote 3 words. Then she grabbed her coat and walked out of the building, leaving her badge on the desk. It was raining again. A heavy, relentless New York deluge that turned the gutters into rivers. Gabriel Blackwood sat in his office, the lights off, illuminated only by the glow of the city below. It was 9 p.m. He rubbed his temples, the headache pounding behind his eyes. He had won the argument with the board barely. He had threatened to sell his majority stake if they forced his hand. They had backed down, terrified of losing him. But the victory felt hollow. He hadn't seen Amelia since the morning. She wasn't answering her phone. "She's gone, sir." Gabriel spun his chair around. His assistant, Samuel, not the foreman, but his personal aide, stood in the doorway, looking uncomfortable. "What do you mean? Gone?" Samuel walked over and placed a piece of paper on the desk. "Security said she left at 2 p.m. She left her badge." "And this?" Gabriel looked at the paper. It was Amelia's handwriting. Elegant, architectural, shaky. "I resign. I'm sorry." Gabriel stared at the words. A cold panic, sharper than any business loss, pierced his chest. He grabbed his coat. "Where is she?" Gabriel demanded. "I tracked her phone," Samuel said. "She's not at her apartment. She's at the church, sir. Street Jude's." "The site is closed," Gabriel said, already moving toward the door. "It's dangerous. The power is cut." "Sir, the storm." "Get the car," Gabriel yelled, sprinting for the elevator. The church loomed in the darkness, a shadowy beast against the rain-streaked sky. The streetlights on the block were out unusual, even for Harlem. The construction fence was rattled by the wind. Gabriel's car screeched to a halt. He jumped out, ignoring the umbrella his driver offered. He ran to the gate. It was unlocked. "Amelia!" he shouted, his voice swallowed by the wind. He pushed through the mud, heading toward the main doors. They were slightly ajar. He entered the nave. It was pitch black inside, smelling of wet stone and sawdust. He pulled out his phone, using the flashlight to cut through the gloom. "Amelia, go away, Gabriel." The voice came from the choir loft. It was small, defeated. Gabriel swept the light up. She was sitting on the edge of the scaffolding, legs dangling over the drop. She looked soaked, her hair plastered to her face, shivering. Gabriel found the construction stairs and took them 2 at a time. When he reached the loft, he slowed down, approaching her like one approaches a frightened animal. "Amelia," he breathed. "Get down from there. It's not safe." "Nothing is safe," she said, not looking at him. She was staring into the dark void of the sanctuary below. "I received a package today. He's going to release my medical records, Gabriel." the miscarriage, the depression. He's going to tell the world I'm unstable. She turned to him, her face ravaged by tears. And he's right. Look at me. I'm hiding in a condemned building in the dark. I'm ruining your company. I'm ruining you. You aren't ruining anything, Gabriel said firmly, taking a step closer. I heard the board meeting, she cried. They want me gone. Mason offers you a deal. Fire me and the project lives. Keep me and he burns it all down. It's simple math, Gabriel. You taught me to look at the structure. The structure of this deal is broken if I'm in it. Screw the deal, Gabriel shouted. The sound echoed off the vaulted ceiling. Amelia flinched. She had never heard him lose control. Gabriel dropped his flashlight. It rolled on the floor, casting erratic shadows. He fell to his knees beside her, grabbing her shoulders. His grip was desperate. Do you think I care about the concrete? Do you think I care about the zoning permits? Gabriel's voice cracked. I have built 100 buildings, Amelia. They are just glass and steel. They are cold. You are the first thing in 10 years that has made me want to wake up in the morning. Amelia stared at him, the rain drumming on the leaky roof above them. Gabriel, Mason isn't attacking the project, Gabriel said intensely, his gray eyes locking onto hers. He's attacking me because he knows I fell in love with you. The silence that followed was louder than the storm. Amelia's breath hitched. You barely know me. I know you, Gabriel whispered. I know how you draw when you're sad. I know how you fight when you're scared. I know that you have more dignity in your little finger than Mason Sterling has in his entire bloodline. He reached up, cupping her wet face in his hands. I am not firing you. I am not letting you go. If he releases your records, we will sue him into oblivion. If he blocks the permits, we will build somewhere else. But I am not doing this without you. Amelia looked at him, and the wall she had built around her heart, the wall Mason had reinforced with every insult, began to crumble. She leaned into his touch, a sob escaping her throat. I'm scared, she whispered. I know, Gabriel said, pulling her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. I've got you. I've got you. For a moment, they held each other in the dark, the storm raging outside but the world feeling strangely still. Then, the smell hit them. It wasn't the smell of wet stone anymore. It was sharp, chemical. Smoke. Gabriel pulled back, sniffing the air. Amelia, do you smell that? She asked. Below them, in the center of the nave where the timber supplies were stacked, a small flicker of orange light appeared. It grew rapidly, climbing the wood with unnatural speed. Fire! Gabriel yelled, hauling Amelia to her feet. We have to go, now. They rushed to the stairs. But as they reached the landing, a massive whoosh sound erupted below. The stack of timber, likely doused in accelerant, exploded into a wall of flame. The heat was instantaneous and searing. The stairs! Amelia screamed. The wooden temporary stairs were already catching fire at the base. We can't go down, Gabriel coughed, the smoke thickening rapidly. Back up, to the bell tower. The bell tower is sealed. We'll break it. Gabriel grabbed her hand, dragging her away from the inferno rising beneath them. The church, the project, the dream, it was all burning. And somewhere in the city, Mason Sterling was probably toasting to his victory. But as they scrambled up the rotting ladder toward the roof, Amelia didn't feel like a victim anymore. She felt the heat on her face, and she felt Gabriel's hand in hers. He tried to burn me out, she thought, adrenaline sharpening her senses. But fire hardens steel. Keep moving, Gabriel shouted, kicking open the hatch to the roof. They burst out into the rain and the night air, gasping for breath as the stained glass windows below them blew out, shattering onto the street in a shower of sparks. The Street Jude project was a torch, but the war had just begun. The fire at Street Jude's didn't burn the project down. It galvanized the city. While the embers were still glowing, the footage from a security camera across the street was already in the hands of the NYPD. It showed a man in a hoodie pouring gasoline on the side door. It didn't take long for the police to find him, and it took even less time for him to cut a deal. He gave up the man who paid him. Mason Sterling's personal fixer. 3 days later, Mason sat in his corner office at Sterling Vance, watching his stock ticker plummet. He was frantically shredding documents when the door flew open. He expected his lawyer. Instead, he saw Amelia. She wasn't wearing the Macy's dress. She wasn't wearing the velvet gown. She was wearing a white power suit, sharp enough to cut glass. Gabriel stood behind her, leaning against the doorframe, looking satisfied. "You can't be here," Mason stammered, his face pale. "Security. Security is busy escorting the FBI into your server room," Gabriel said calmly. "Arson is a felony, Mason. Conspiracy to commit arson is another. And insurance fraud? That's just the cherry on top." Mason slumped into his chair. "Amelia, please. It was a mistake. I was stressed. We can work this out. I can give you the house in the Hamptons. I can." "I don't want your house, Mason," Amelia said, stepping up to his desk. She placed the rusted iron nail, the one he had sent her as a threat, on the mahogany surface. "I built a life out of the scraps you threw away. You thought you could burn me out? Fire clears the way for new growth." 2 federal agents stepped into the room. "Mason Sterling, you are under arrest." As they handcuffed him, dragging him past the weeping Tiffany Roche in the hallway, Mason looked back at Amelia one last time. He didn't see a victim. He saw a titan. 1 year later, the Street Jude Cultural Center opened on a warm spring evening. It was a masterpiece, a blend of the preserved stone arches and modern, soaring glass that rose from the ashes of the fire. The Phoenix Wing, designed by Amelia Miller, was featured on the cover of Architectural Digest. Amelia stood on the balcony, looking out at the crowd. The community was there, kids running in the garden, jazz musicians playing in the crypt-turned lounge. "It's perfect," a voice said. Gabriel appeared beside her, holding 2 glasses of champagne. He looked at the building, then he looked at her. "The building is nice," Gabriel corrected. "But the architect is what I'm investing in." He reached into his pocket. This time, it wasn't a business card. It was a small, velvet box, but inside, there was no rusted nail. There was a diamond, cut with the same precision as the building they stood in. "Partner?" Gabriel asked, a rare vulnerability in his eyes. Amelia looked at the man who had seen her when she was invisible. She looked at the ring. Then she looked at the city she had helped build. "Partner," she smiled, taking his hand. Mason Sterling was watching the news from a cell in Rikers Island. He turned off the TV, sitting in the dark. He had mocked her for being nothing. Now, she was everything. Amelia's story isn't just about revenge, it's about rediscovery. Mason Sterling made the fatal mistake of confusing value with price. He thought Amelia was worthless because she didn't come with a price tag, failing to see the priceless resilience, creativity, and loyalty she possessed. In the end, he lost his empire trying to destroy her, while she built a new one by believing in herself. It's a reminder to us all, the people who try to bury you often forget that you are a seed. When someone tells you that you are nothing, remember that empty space is the only place where you can build something magnificent. Don't let the Masons of the world define your worth. Write your own blueprint. If Amelia's story inspired you to stand up for your own worth, hit that like button right now. It really helps the channel. Have you ever had someone doubt you, only for you to prove them wrong later? I want to hear your story. Drop a comment below with "I am the architect of my life," so I know you made it to the end. And if you want more stories about justice, romance, and rising from the ashes, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss next week's story about a betrayed CEO who went undercover to save his father's company. Thanks for watching.